And regarding painting the other eye in perspective, that your ability to do that will be related to your ability to draw things in 3D. So if you know, let's just do it real quick here with the skull. You got a loose indication of a cranium, cheekbone, jaw, center line, which is the really important part here. Nasal cavity, out, in, out again for the chin. It rhymes. And then the orbitals for the eye sockets. Brow ridge. Let's just put that as dark values. Anyway, basic skull, that's fine. One thing that you have to practice to understand 3D things being reflected on an axis is if we took this center line, which is the important part here, and drew it down, and then we could say that it could have like a floor or a grid in just basic 1-point perspective. Maybe something like that. Not that you have to do this every time, but this is the principle and the concept that you have to understand. So before I even do that, if you have an object here, to reflect it on the axis that we just put here, what you have to do is figure out this space. Oh, it's black and white. You have to figure out this distance and figure out where this spot is over here, but also this spot is over there. And you can do that accurately by making a rectangle here. And then you figure out the center line of it. And then figuring out where the halfway mark is right here. This point is really important. And that's going to be, given to us by that. And then the next part is taking a line from this dot through this one. Because watch what happens when we do that. Let's just make a straight line like this and make it accurate by letting it start at this guy over here. You can actually hold Alt and pull the pivot to be over here. And if we let it go through that middle line, which is very important, it'll give us the exact distance here. Right there. Okay. And to test it, if we just take that distance and move that over to over here, it's off. Damn. How did I mess that up? Oh, so I went slightly too high right here. So it should be, see, just a subtle shift of that. It's going to be a little bit off. I'm going to blame the low resolution for it. Anyway, so it intersects not here, but right there. Anyway, that's the principle behind it. And you could actually draw a center line like this and keep doing that indefinitely to get the same size rectangle over and over. But for the purpose of this, what we wanted to do is figure out where the circle starts over here. But now we need to figure out where it ends because we can't just eyeball it. Now you would do the same thing for this distance. Okay, so you make an X because we're trying to find where this line is. Let's actually make it lined up. X. That's the center line. Let's hope it works this time. Okay, let's rotate it and have it start at that point. Let's move that pivot over here. You could just do this by hand or with a ruler. And we want to see where it intersects that middle line. It's about right here. And if we extend this out, that's about where the circle should start and finish. I feel like it's a little bit too far, but let's see. Okay, let's move that over. That's close enough. But yeah, it is a little bit too far. But anyway, this is a basic approximation of how to reflect something on an axis. And if you can't do it in a top-down 2D way, just to get a circle in the right spot against an axis like that, you can't possibly do it in 3D. So if I have an object over here, let's just make it a square. That same process has to happen and reflect on this axis in 3D. So you would go through the motions of figuring out this distance, making an X in perspective on the grid, doing that line to find out the midpoint, which is there, and then you would extend these lines outward. And then you would draw a straight line from this corner through that midpoint to find out this line, which is a reflection of that line. And then you do the same thing over here. X, X. I'm just doing it loosely here because this is definitely not a perspective course, but this is what you're going to look for if you want to master this. Center line, midpoint. Start from here, go through that midpoint, go all the way to over here, which will give us that spot, roughly speaking. And if we shade this in, we know that that's also the same thing going to be shaded in. It's a little bit off, but that's what you have to practice, mirroring stuff in 3D and becoming so familiar with how that should look that when you go to do that on actual 3D objects, it's the same thing. So all that complexity would boil down to knowing that the sphere of the eyeball is here and figuring out on the axis of the eyeball, where's the midpoint? And then you do the same process of looking at this square, mirroring it over, finding out that it's about right there. And that's where the eyeball would start. And then the same thing with where it would end. Now I've drawn the eyeball really big. That's fine. But on that same center line, draw the X, find that midpoint, draw a line all the way through, and then find out where that is in perspective. And I totally missed it right there. Let's actually draw this line first. Okay, that gives us this line. That means the eye, the other eye is going to be inside this, right? So that's how you would find the other eye. It's a bit complex, but now you know what to look for. I may cover this far more in depth if I do a course on perspective. By the way, the more you do this as a study, carefully and slowly, the more intuitive it becomes, where you don't even need to map things out. You'll just know you'll know when things feel off or correctly in perspective, measured against a center line. All right, that was a long-winded side journey for talking about that. But now we have that, because it's like all of that work just to have a couple brush strokes being in the right place here. Super important, but it's got to be done. I've put in my time. It's your turn. Okay, so let's just keep going with this. That's supposed to be further out, even though earlier we said that the nose should be further out than that, but that's because the nose isn't far out enough. All this should be darker because it's in shadow. Okay, let's make the nostril area a little bit darker in terms of the edge. Looks sharper here. Right. And just look at how, by simplifying the nose into these basic shapes, in terms of these polygons or geometry, and that there's going to be a highlight here, somewhat of a highlight there, and a highlight there. It kind of reads really well when you're zoomed out. It's like it has that subtle implication of the planes of the nose. Practice it. Get good at that. Low poly, everything. And then make it high poly and refined. Okay, so that was the breakdown for the eyeball and eyelids area, as well as the brow ridge, and just a quick overview on how to reflect the eye and finding the other eye. From here, we'll be moving on to the ear.